You bring shame to this village with your actions. Everyone here knows what you did.
She didn't even hear it happen. One moment, her son was there, standing at the edge of the yard, his small feet bare against the warm earth, laughing at something only he could see. The next moment, the yard was empty. The air smelled of river water and burning black herbs. And in the dirt where his feet had been, there was nothing. Not a footprint. Not a whimper. Not a single trace that he had ever breathed in that spot at all. Only the river singing softly in the distance, as if it had done nothing wrong. Welcome to a brand new story. And if this is your very first time joining us, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on your notifications, because every story we tell is one you will not want to miss. Now, let us go back to where it all began. Her name was Zola, and she had already lost more than most people lose in a lifetime. Her husband, Kwame, had been a good man, quiet, steady, with hands that knew how to build things and a laugh that made every room feel warmer simply by being in it. He died 3 years before the story begins, not from war or old age, but from a swift and nameless fever that arrived one night and by morning had taken everything. The healers said there was nothing to be done, but the village said something else entirely. They said Zola had brought it. They said there was a darkness in her. Something inherited, something ancient and wrong. They pointed to the fact that she had no mother and no father anyone could name, that she had arrived in that first village as a child, carried by a traveling merchant who claimed to be her uncle and who never returned. Women like her, they whispered, rootless women, women without bloodlines anyone could trace, carried misfortune inside them the way the soil carries seeds. She tried to stay. She planted. She cooked. She smiled and helped neighbors carry water and grind grain and lay thatch on their roofs. It didn't matter. After Kwame died, every door in the village closed slowly and quietly until she and her 5-year-old son Senu were standing alone in the dust with nowhere left to turn. So she left. She wrapped her son on her back, gathered what little remained of her life into a single cloth bundle, and walked toward a place she had heard about only in passing, a village on the far edge of a wide, dark forest, beside a river whose name no one quite agreed on. People said it was simple there, peaceful. She did not need much. Only peace. Only a fresh beginning. Only a place where no one knew her name or her history or the shape of her grief. She found the village in the golden light of late afternoon. And for one breathless moment, standing at its edge with Senu sleeping warm against her back, she thought, this is it. This is where the suffering ends. But that was before the old woman at the entrance grabbed her wrist. Before she looked Zola directly in the eyes with something between pity and warning. Before she said, in a voice low enough only for Zola to hear, "Welcome, daughter. Build your life here. But hear me well. When the sun begins to fall, bring your child inside. Lock your door. Do not let him near the river after dusk. Not even once. Not for any reason at all." She released Zola's wrist and turned back to her fish without another word, as if she had said nothing unusual. Zola almost laughed. Another village superstition. She had heard a dozen like it. She nodded, thanked the woman, and walked into her new life. She did not know she would spend the next weeks replaying those words in her mind like a warning she had been too exhausted to hear. For the village was warm and unhurried, and the women accepted Zola the way good people accept strangers, carefully at first, then all at once. They showed her which roots to boil for fever, which corner of the market had the freshest tomatoes, which elder to greet first and with which words. She learned quickly and worked hard. She laughed for the first time in what felt like years, and the sound surprised her like hearing a song she had forgotten she knew. And Senu thrived. He was a fast, bright child with a gap in his front teeth and a habit of asking questions no one could answer. He came home every evening with his knees dirty and his eyes bright. Watching him, Zola felt something loosen inside her chest, something that had been knotted tight for 3 years. The cautious, fragile beginning of hope. She was careful about the river at first. Very careful. She always called Senu in before sunset, always tracked where he was playing, always locked the door when the light turned amber and low. But carefulness is a muscle, and muscles loosen when nothing goes wrong. 6 weeks of nothing going wrong is a long time. It happened on the evening she was distracted by a pot boiling over. She had left Senu playing in the yard just outside the window. She could hear his voice. She was certain she could hear his voice. And she turned for no more than 2 minutes to pull the pot from the fire. Maybe 3. Certainly no more than 3. When she stepped back to the window, the yard was empty. The air smelled of river water and burning black herbs. And from somewhere beyond the yard, not a scream, not a cry, a silence. Total. Complete. The particular unnatural silence of a place where a child's voice had just been erased from the world. Zola ran. Through the yard, through the narrow path between the huts, through the dark edge of the forest, following nothing but instinct and the faint cold scent of the river. Branches tore at her arms. The light vanished completely. She did not stop. She reached the riverbank breathless, her chest heaving, her eyes wild in the dark. The water was black and wide and still. On the bank, a single small footprint in the mud pointed toward the water's edge. "Snu." Her voice cracked the night open like a stone through glass. Nothing. She waded in without hesitating. The cold hit her like a wall, shockingly cold. Far colder than any river had a right to be in that season. The water rose to her knees, her waist, her chest. Her feet left the bottom. She kept going, kept swimming, kept reaching into the dark water by touch, searching for something, for anything. And then the current seized her. Not like a normal current. Like a hand. Deliberate. Targeted. It pulled her straight down, fast, deep, until the surface vanished and the pressure in her ears became a roar and her lungs began to burn, and she thought, "This is it. This is how it ends." Then everything stopped. The pressure disappeared. The cold became something bearable. And Zola opened her eyes in the deep and saw light. Not sunlight. Something older. Amber, pulsing, rising from below like a slow heartbeat. She breathed in, terrifying, impossible, and found that she could. She swam downward toward the light, and what she found there shook something fundamental loose inside her. It was a kingdom, but not a beautiful one. Not the glowing coral world of legend. This was a kingdom of gray stone and pale roots and cold amber light, where the buildings were carved directly from riverbed rock and everything wore a thin skin of silt, like a place that hadn't been properly cleaned in decades. Like a place that had forgotten what joy felt like. And moving through it, silent and blank-faced, were children. Dozens of them. Some as young as Senu. Some older, teenagers who must have been taken years before. They carried water, swept stone floors, arranged offerings on low altars, and worked with the hollow efficiency of people who had long since stopped expecting anything different. Their eyes were not frightened. They were empty, which was so much worse than fear. At the center of the kingdom sat the Hollow Mother. Zola had expected something monstrous. She was not prepared for what she actually saw. The Hollow Mother was an old woman or something shaped like one. She sat on a throne carved from a single black river stone, wrapped in robes the color of deep water. Her face was carved deep with age, her eyes sharp and knowing, her lips thin and curled in the particular satisfaction of someone who has everything they have ever wanted. Around her neck hung hundreds of tiny clay pendants, each one etched with a name. She looked at Zola the way a person looks at something that has wandered into the wrong room, amused, utterly unsurprised. "You came for the boy," she said. "Not a question. Give me my son." Zola's voice was steadier than she felt. Her eyes moved across the children, searching every face for Senu's gap-toothed smile. The Hollow Mother tilted her head. "They all say that. They come, they demand, they weep." She gestured at the children. Their mothers said the same. And yet, here the children remain. "You have no right to them." "I have every right." The old woman's voice dropped to something flat and cold as riverbed stone. I am the keeper of this river. I was old before your village had a name. The children I take, I preserve them. They do not age here. They do not sicken. They do not suffer the way the living suffer on the surface. I offer them permanence. You offer them nothing, Zola said quietly. Look at their eyes. And that was when she saw him. Among the blank-faced children moving in silent circles, one pair of eyes that were not entirely empty. A boy of perhaps 13, tall, careful, with a measured way of moving that told Zola he had learned long ago to do everything slowly so as not to be noticed. He was watching her, not with hope, with something more dangerous than hope, recognition, as if some buried stubborn part of him still remembered what it felt like to be truly seen. His name was Bayo. He had been taken 7 years before. He was the Hollow Mother's most trusted servant, the one who arranged the other children in their duties, the one who had perhaps, over 7 years of amber light and gray stone, begun to forget that he had once had a mother who loved him. What Zola said next changed everything. You remember her, don't you? She said to him directly, ignoring the Hollow Mother entirely. Your mother. You remember the sound of her voice. Bayo went very still. Don't speak to him, the Hollow Mother said sharply. You remember how she called your name? Zola continued, low and unrelenting. And somewhere in you, in whatever part of you she could not reach and hollow out, you are ashamed, because you have been her hands. You have been the one the others trust. And you have been using that trust to keep them here. The silence that followed was the deepest thing Zola had ever felt. Deeper than the river. Deeper than grief itself. Bayo's jaw tightened. His eyes filled with something wet and desperate that he clearly had not permitted himself to feel in years. I do what I must, he whispered. So did I, Zola said. Until I chose not to. The Hollow Mother rose from her throne. The amber light pulsed. The clay pendants rattled around her neck like a warning drum. Bravery is not enough, surface woman. Nothing you say changes what is mine. But something had already changed. Something quiet and irreversible. The way a single cracked stone changes the foundation of a wall. Bayo moved. Not toward Zola. Not yet, but subtly, almost invisibly, toward a corridor of gray stone to the left of the throne room. Zola caught the movement. He glanced at her once, the briefest flicker of his eyes, and looked away. It was enough. While the Hollow Mother continued speaking in the certain, unhurried voice of someone who had never truly been challenged, Zola began moving through the children. Slowly, scanning every face. And then she found him. Near the back of the room, standing very still with his eyes on the floor, and his small hands folded in front of him, Senu. He had been here no more than an hour, but already the amber light had begun to dim the brightness in his eyes, the way fog dims a lantern. She placed her hand on his shoulder. He flinched. He looked up. And then, with a sound that cracked her chest wide open, he said the only word that mattered. Mama. The Hollow Mother turned. Run, said Bayo. Loudly. Clearly. The voice of a boy who had been silent for 7 years finally choosing sound. Everything broke at once. Zola lifted Senu into her arms and ran toward the gray corridor. Following Bayo's long, fast strides through passageways she never could have navigated alone. Behind them the amber light shifted to something furious and red. The stone walls trembled. The Hollow Mother's voice filled the water around them. Not a scream, something far worse. A low, reverberant command in a language Zola couldn't understand but felt in her teeth and the backs of her eyes. Bayo moved without hesitation, turning through passages he had spent 7 years memorizing, until he stopped at a wall that looked like every other wall, pressed his palm flat against the stone, closed his eyes and hummed, a child's song half-remembered fraying at the edges. The wall shivered. A crack of pale light appeared. Cold, clean water poured in. Go, Bayo said. Come with us, Zola said. He hesitated. 1 second. 2. Behind them the walls shuddered again, and somewhere back in the throne room, a sound like 1,000 shattering clay pendants filled the deep. "Come with us," Zola said again. Not a plea. Fact. He went. They burst through the surface into a night sky full of cold stars. Zola gasped. Senu cried, really cried, the kind of crying that means the body is remembering it is alive. Bayo surfaced last, and the moment the night air touched his face, something unraveled in his expression. Something vast. Like a man realizing mid-fall that someone has caught him. They dragged themselves onto the bank. Muddy. Shaking. Alive. But the river was not finished with them. The water began to move against itself, backward circling, rising in a slow dark column from the center of the river. A shape assembling itself from water and silt and cold amber light. The hollow mother, reforming on the surface, her robes spreading across the water like oil. Her eyes fixed on the three of them with ancient and unblinking fury. "What is mine does not leave," she said. And her voice was the river itself. Zola's body was shaking, but her feet were planted. "Then take me," she said. "Leave the children and take me. I will stay. I will serve you. Forever, if that is what you demand. Just let them go." The hollow mother looked at her for a long measuring moment. A willing adult servant. Something she had never been freely offered. The river stilled around her. "You would truly choose this," she said. "I would." And then Bayo stepped forward and stood beside Zola, shoulder to shoulder, without a word. And from the bank behind them, torchlight. Voices. The villagers, drawn by Zola's earlier cry, had followed the forest path with lanterns held high, led by the old fish seller from the village entrance. She who had given the warning from the very beginning, she who knew far more than she had ever said. And rising from the water around the hollow mother, in slow and blinking confusion, came the other children. Dozens of them, surfacing one by one, as if Bayo's single act of defiance had snapped something foundational in the kingdom below, as if the entire structure had depended on one willing servant, and now that servant had walked away, the walls were dissolving from the inside. The hollow mother's form flickered. The amber light guttered like a candle in the wind. The clay pendants around her neck, each one bearing a stolen child's name, began to dissolve one by one, like salt dropped into warm water. The old fish seller walked to the water's edge with something in her hand, a small bundle of knotted white cord and river herbs, and cast it into the current without ceremony. Where it landed, the water went dark. The amber light extinguished completely. The hollow mother's column of form collapsed inward with a sound like a long, exhausted sigh. And then there was nothing left but the river, running clean and quiet and ordinary in the dark, and the sound of dozens of confused and blinking children standing on the bank in torchlight, slowly, carefully beginning to remember their own names. They called it the night of the coming back. In the weeks that followed, families traveled from distant villages to the riverbank. Some who had stopped hoping years before, some who had built quiet shrines for children they believed were gone forever. One by one they found them. Some reunions were loud, full of weeping and laughter braided together into something that had no name. Some were quiet, a mother pressing her face into her child's neck and staying there for a very long time, saying nothing at all, needing nothing more than the proof of breath. Bayo's mother was still alive. She was found in a village 3 days' walk to the east, older and grayer and quieter than he remembered, with the particular stillness of a woman who had learned to carry loss without putting it down. When they brought Bayo to her doorway, she looked at him for a long moment, taking in his height, the age in his eyes, the years folded into a space where they did not belong. Then she opened her arms. He walked into them like a child of 6, and she held him like one. No words, no questions, only the grip of someone who had refused to let go even when she had nothing left to hold. Zola built a home near the river. Not from fear but from choice. She planted a garden wide enough for 3, and in the evenings Senu and Bayo, who was slowly, haltingly teaching himself to be young again, would sit in the doorway while she cooked, and all of them could hear the river, clean and quiet and unhurried, doing nothing more sinister than running over smooth stones. The old fish seller came one afternoon and drank palm wine in Zola's yard and said very little, which was her way. When she finally rose to leave, she paused and looked at Zola with those careful ancient eyes and said, "I gave you the warning. You did not keep it perfectly, but you kept what mattered. You kept going back." Zola thought about those words for a long time after she left. She thought about Kwame and the village that had blamed her, and the road she had walked with a child on her back and nothing else. She thought about all the ways the world had tried to make her small, and how each time she had refused, not with fury, not with spectacle, but with the quiet, grinding insistence of someone who simply would not stop moving forward. She thought about what it means to love a child, how it is at once the most ordinary and the most terrifying force that exists in the world, how it walks into dark water without calculating the risk, how it stands between its child and something ancient and says, without drama or decoration, "Not this one. Not tonight." And in the river flowing past her yard each morning, clean, clear, ordinary, there was no trace of what had once lived beneath it. No amber light. No gray stone corridors. No blank-eyed children sweeping silt from floors they had not chosen. Only water, running free, the way it was always meant to. The curse Zola had carried from her first village, the whispers, the blame, the long shadow of a grief she had been made to wear like a punishment, had no soil left to grow in. It had been washed away the night she walked into the river for her son, the night she chose love over fear, not once but twice, once by going in and once by offering to stay. Some wounds, it turns out, are not healed by justice. They are not healed by revenge or proof, or the validation of those who doubted you. They are healed by a single ordinary act of extraordinary courage. By a mother who runs. By a boy who hums a half-forgotten song against a stone wall and chooses, after 7 silent years, to use his voice. By an old woman who casts dried herbs into dark water at exactly the right moment and says nothing about it afterward. By the stubborn, unreasonable, magnificent insistence that the people you love are worth the river, the dark, the cold, and whatever waits, patient and hungry, in the world beneath the surface. Even when, and especially when, no one would blame you for turning back. If this story held you from the first breath to the last, if you felt your chest tighten at the riverbank and only exhale at the very end, then you already know what to do. Share this with someone who needs to hear a story about a love that does not quit. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Drop a comment telling us which moment hit you hardest and come back, because the next story is already waiting in the dark. And trust us, you do not want to miss it.